All right. So for our next session, we'll be focusing on sustainable growth and demographic dividend, unlocking the wealth creation for India's youth. And for this particular session, we are very elated to invite Shashwat Goenka, the Vice Chairperson of RP-Sanjiv Goenka Group. And this particular session will be moderated by Meghna, the Head of International Programming Impact, UNICEF UK.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? The beauty is we've got the post-coffee, post-lunch graveyard session. So how's the energy level?
Seems pretty low.
All right. Oh, I'm getting some thumbs up as well. So that's brilliant. You've actually gone through the entire day and still the energy levels are high. And then something to energize me is the fact that we have a clock timer here, which is like ticking away. So hopefully we can do a good job within the time that we have. The session is quite evident. I think it's quite written on the board. It's all about sustainable growth and demographic dividend. And there's that youth component. And Shashwat has been already introduced. So I'm not going to get into the introductions because it actually ran into a long list, right? But at the same time, I think the whole point of us coming together was the economic side of it and how Shashwat can speak to the private sector side of it. And with me, with my UNICEF hat on, I really wanted to think about it from the youth perspective of it. Because if you know what UNICEF's mandate is, we are for every child and young person. So I just wanted to open up with the definition of sustainable growth. And I know all of you kind of know it, but it's an assumption sometimes in our heads. So when you think about sustainable growth, and if you go back to the Brundtland definition, which was in 1984, really long time back, people were thinking about sustainable development, which is brilliant. They defined development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generations. And when you think about future generations, that's children and young people. So for us, that's very critical, right? And also when you think about sustainable development, it could be economic, exactly as Shashwat will then we'll talk about it a bit more. But then it also intersects with the environment side of it and also the social side of it. And that's where, again, UNICEF kind of comes in, the social equity side of it. Are we reaching the most marginalized youth as well? And then also the environmental stewardship side of it. And inclusive economic growth. So I just wanted to frame that. And I also wanted to, this is my final point before I move on to Shashwat and probably do a little bit of a questioning. And the interesting bit is, Shashwat and I have just met today. So we've kind of, we're kind of getting our vibes, as they say. And Shashwat, I think the two common points I've picked up so far is, one, we both speak Bengali. Oh, thank you. But we're not going to break into Bengali. No questioning in Bengali. But the second thing that I found is that Shashwat has dabbled into something that I'm going to talk about, which is Generation Unlimited or YUVA. And you have known about it and you've kind of interacted with UNICEF colleagues on that. So that was a commonality. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to just touch upon that. Because when I'm talking about youth and sustainable development, this initiative was kind of started in 2019 by UNICEF to reach 300 million young people in India. And what I wanted to say here is, what is unique about this is sustainable growth for and with the youth. So often we talk about public-private partnerships. This is actually public-private youth partnership. And when I talk about public, obviously you know the ministries in India. They are all our partners. So we have Minister of Women and Child Development, and so many other ministries. But also I want to know, before moving on to Shashwat, is the private sector part of it. There are lots of private sector partners who are also working in India with the same objective, like Amazon, Capgemini, Children's Investment Fund Foundation, and many others. And I can just keep on listing the names. So that's why I was really excited when this opportunity came up to talk about sustainable growth and demographic dividend. So in light of that, I thought, Shashwat, we could actually start talking about the demographic dividend side of it. Because India's young population is thriving and we want that potential to be captured. We all know about it. But with that in mind, what do you think are the key enablers to ensure that we can, I know you would like to call it sustainable economic growth, which is perfect. But at the same time, how do we also think about sustainable growth? And perhaps, UNICEF coming into the picture, but with your lens in. And then also how policymakers and businesses can unlock that potential with that demographic dividend as well. So over to you, Shashwat.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for that introduction as well. I'm a real honor to be here in front of all of you all. And hopefully I will not bore you all to sleep after the coffee break. But yeah, when you look at India today, right, 7% of India is under the age of 35. There is no other country like that today in the world that has such a big demographic dividend, such a big youth population, and such a big youth population, a large chunk of which is now entering the workforce, right? And so you could say, in a way, India is today where China was 20 years ago, right? But we have with us today very fast changing technology which is available, which was not available to China 20 years ago, right? And therefore that puts us in a very unique position to be able to come out as a global economic superpower, right? And I think coupled with the demographic dividend that we have, what we have today in India is very stable policies. I think the government over the last 12 years has kind of come up with very stable policies, economic policies, sectoral policies, societal policies, and they have built on each one of them year over year with consistency and dedication, right? And so whether you look at there are a lot of policies specifically for the youth, whether you look at Skilled India, Digital India, whether you look at Startup India, all of these have been put in place keeping in mind the potential of the demographic dividend that we as India have. And when I look at the businesses that we are doing today as well, a large chunk of what we are doing is trying to capture this youth and the youth market, right? And specifically, if I give you one example, it's from the FMCG space or the consumption space, right? Where today, when you look at, let's say, Gen Zs, or you look at younger millennials and now Gen Alpha as they're coming into their late teen years and are consuming, they look for instant gratification. They are not saving money for 20 years later, 30 years later. They are not saving money to buy a car, to buy a house. They are wanting to spend the money that they earn immediately on experiences. They want to spend that money that they earn on becoming more informed or better in something that they don't know enough about, right? And so therefore, the kind of expenditure has changed and the nature of consumption has changed. And for us, at least at RPSG, one of the things we are doing is trying to capitalize on this trend.
Thank you, Shashwat. And that's so important in a way because I was thinking about going back to Generation Unlimited and the UVA initiative I was talking about. There are three objectives within that. One is the skills development side of it, and what we call it as learning to earning potential. So how do you then build that? The second is definitely in the entrepreneurship space, and then also the civic participation plus climate action. And the third is very much including the marginalized youth and also girls in this economic progress that we're talking about. So how do we make it inclusive economic progress as well?
Absolutely. And just to add to that, all the policies I spoke about earlier as well, if you look at India in 2013, we barely had any startups. We barely had any unicorns. Fast forward to 2020, we had like over 100 startups and over 100 unicorns in a year, right? So I think that's the potential that India has.
Perfect. Thank you. So that was the kind of the demographic dividend that we are trying to leverage on. The second bit that I wanted to talk about, slightly shifting here, but I know somebody in the earlier session talked about it, but I think would love to see your response to it as well. One of the sessions talked about the linkages between tradition and innovation, and especially with a business which has a legacy. How do you carry on that legacy, but also think about it in terms of innovation?
So I think for people in the room who may not know, so I come from a business family which has got a 200-year-old legacy, right? And so I would be now the 8th generation of family in the business. And as a business family, we have, with each generation, reinvented what the core business has been, right? And even today, we are doing the same thing. So for example, if you look at 1990s till 2018, a large part of our business was in thermal generation and distribution of power, right? That today is transforming completely to being the generation as well as the distribution. Generation completely moving to hybrid wind and solar with battery, and a lot more AI being used in the distribution and grid networks as well. We acquired a company which is an IT-enabled services company which actually operates out of the UK and the US in 2012. so traditionally called a BPO company, right? We spoke about full-time employees. Today, we don't talk about full-time employees anymore. It's converted again completely to an AI organization where we're talking about what is the value add we can bring to the client, and beyond just number of billable hours, how can you actually work on increasing their profits or their margins, and that's the value add that we are going to bring to them. So in a way, we are transforming each of the businesses that we had.
Thank you. And you've kind of picked up on that. So it's like the innovation, and then we think about that links to my next question in a way. Because there is a lot of digital acceleration happening, and we know India is in that mode. But I want to bring the UNICEF lens on it.
Sure.
There is a digital acceleration, but there's also a growing digital divide. And I know somewhere you said that you would want to also think about tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Absolutely.
And I remember, I don't know whether the audience member is still here, but one of you kind of mentioned in one of the questions, what are we thinking about other cities as well? We always think about the urban cities. What about other cities? There's so much potential that can be unlocked. So I just wanted to ask you, with the digital acceleration and the equity, and when I say equity, it's not the economic equity, it's the social equity in terms of marginalized. How do you think the rise of this digital commerce and this changing consumer behavior can be tapped in, and what is RSPG doing towards that?
So, when you look at the digital economy that we live in today, I think that has leveled a lot of the differences between tier 1 or metro cities and tier 2 and tier 3 cities, right? Right from the exposure that people living in these cities or tier 2, tier 3 cities can get, to the opportunities that they can get, right? If you look at quick commerce players today, right, a large chunk of their growth is actually coming from the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. For us, in our FMCG play as well, we have a separate brand that we are focusing on tier 3 cities as well, where you're trying to bring new age products and flavors to them, but at value pricing, which is relevant from that economy standpoint. So I think the divide is reducing. I think when you look at data as well, we're looking at another 130 million middle class people being added to that rung. In fact, I think I saw when we were discussing earlier, we were talking about it. So they are coming in from tier 2, tier 3, and I think what I was talking about the new generation is they are very aspirational, right? And so therefore that the shift and that divide becoming lesser is what we are already seeing. And I think the next decade in India is going to be all about that. 10 years ago, most of our villages were not electrified. Today, almost 100% of them are, right? So I think it's just about creating that equal access to resources, and basic resources first, and then everything else, and then technology will cover the rest.
Exactly that. Thank you. And I just recently, with my hat on as International Programs Impact Head, with UNICEF, I traveled to Bihar, went to Muzaffarnagar, and I was very interested to see, because exactly what are these kind of generational engagement actually doing on the ground as well. And exactly to your point, there are so many youth who are already using innovative digital skills, which is not just being worked with UNICEF and government. I have to bring in government here, because if you want to make anything sustainable and systems level change, you have to think about the government and have to work with them, but also private sector partners.
Absolutely.
And exactly as you said, I think that's what will hopefully move the dial towards that digital divide to then digital acceleration with the right intent.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Shashwat. I can see the clock. Clock is at 3 minutes, but I still have one question. Okay. And you kind of touched upon it, which is on sustainability. No conversation on sustainable growth can be without sustainability. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about you talked about the renewable energy aspect of it. Green growth in itself, how do we make it as a default? Because currently it kind of clashes with the cost aspect of it. It's currently a premium exception. So as a business, how are you incorporating sustainability? And what would your suggestions be for the rest of the private sector and perhaps broader organizations as well?
So, 5 years ago, talking green meant a lot more expenditure. And it was just a must-have, because maybe investors wanted it, was the right thing to do, it felt right. But when you look at it today, the cost of going green is actually equal or cheaper than the cost of not going green, right? And if you look at power generation, thermal power generation is a lot more expensive than if you look at generation by solar power, at least in India, right? So I think, and technology is playing a role in this because technology is evolving so fast that it's reducing the cost of doing a lot of business green. So I think as people become more aware, and as technology enables us to kind of improvise on all the green initiatives that the industry or even governments overall are doing, it's a no-brainer that we are going to be moving towards a greener environment. And I think it's very important, especially from an Indian context, because of the young demographic dividend that we have. It is important that we create energy security and we create sustainable security for our future generations, right? And that can only come in if every business starts to build in green goals. And today we're seeing across the country, not just in India, but across the world actually now, everyone is moving towards that. And while the starting point may have been investor-led or what is expected of businesses to do, I think in the heart of heart, everyone realizes this is what genuinely needs to be done to ensure that there is a long and sustainable future for all of humanity. Right, so I mean, not to give like a motherhood statement, but really in our businesses, right from green energy to moving our chemicals business to having green chemicals, to even simple small things like, you know, and this is something in our retail business we did 15 years ago, was we moved away completely from plastic bags and we moved completely to paper and woven bags, and you know, so small things that we do, and but now it just needs to be done in a much larger way.
Thank you, Shashwat. And I just wanted to add to that, if you were paying attention to what I said, one of the objectives of Generation Unlimited was also that civic action and climate action, civic participation. And you'll see youth of today are expecting this to happen. So it's not just the economic growth, they also want cleaner water, cleaner air, cleaner environments. So I think this is something exactly as you said. How do we also make it not just for youth, but also with youth? So
Absolutely.
it's like the youth-led sustainability aspect of it also.
And just to add on generation shift and where sustainability comes in, is the younger generation is very aware of these, very aware of things like climate change, for example, or sustainability. And for them, that is a measure of whether or not they believe in the ethos of a brand or a company. It's not necessarily just the revenue growth or the profit growth.
Thank you, Shashwat. It's now flashing zero, literally. So I will look to the organizers. Oh wow, look at that. Perfect, thank you. So please do that next time as well. So that means we have done our bit, but we should then open the floor for any questions. And great, I can see already 3 hands up. Okay, shall I start from, probably room-wise, as in section-wise? So maybe...
No, so I want to ask you a question about Spencer's Retail.
Okay.
So I have 2 questions about it.
Sure.
So when you took over it, so it was kind of struggling, so how do you implemented the plan, like the induction plan for it? And my second question is, how was the thing for the Spencer's Retail?
Makes fine living affordable.
Make fine living affordable. So how do you come up with that line?
Sure. So I think we looked at it, I mean, when I started looking into the business right after I graduated from college, the idea was really, at that point, it was a very financial objective saying, it's been loss-making for 35 years, we need to convert it to profits, right? And I think we worked step by step, going into every little detail of that business, right from understanding demand to supply chain to all the cost levers we had. And it's a very cliched line, but it's very true for the retail business, which is, retail is all about the detail, or what we say, the devil is in the details, right? And when we really went line by line, that's when we were really able to identify what are the factors that, help us increase the number of footfalls and hence the number of bills, and what are the factors that help us increase the average bill value per customer, and how can we grow on those to get growth. And what are the cost levers that we can optimize where you can still enhance customer experience but do it at a lower cost. So for us, I think that was what it was. And makes fine living affordable was a tagline which I actually inherited. I didn't come up with it. It was already there. But the whole objective behind that was to bring to India the fact that, to bring to aspirational India, that your aspirations are possible and they don't have to be as expensive as they were for your parents. They will be a lot more affordable and a lot more reasonable. So it was just to put that out there.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm going to go for a hand which is another gender. Um, and I think you have already asked a question, so the girl below, after. Yes, please. So you can see my trend. Maybe the next one will be somebody who works or maybe studies. I'm quite interested with children and youth. You can clearly see that, right? So,
Hi, so I'm Nyanika. So Meghna, thank you so much for such a clear definition of like an otherwise seemingly cliched phrase of sustainable development. But there's obviously like a pretense of sustainable development within companies. So how do you address the abuse of greenwashing, for example?
So for us, at least, I mean, I can't speak at large, but at least for us, we are very, very clear that we are not doing any of this, whether it is sustainability or any other aspect of our business for vanity. We're only doing it when we genuinely, one, believe in it, and secondly, when we genuinely believe we can sustainably continue to do that year over year over year. So for us, that's the two clear mantras we have. We are very clear we're not doing it just to greenwash or to, none of that. So.
and there are quite a number of private sector partners who are working with us because this is something that cannot be tackled on its own. Neither UNICEF, nor the government, nor the private sector on their own can do it. But if
Everyone has to come together.
then it can. And of course, youth have to come together as well. So, I will go at the back. Okay, you gentlemen. Yes, please. And I'm assuming you fit in the category of youth as well. Sorry for my assumption, but I've been told today that I don't look like a mother of 17-year-old also. Yeah. So I guess I'm just going with that assumption. Please do.
It's me, right? No.
Oh, I was actually thinking about you.
Can I ask a quick in the meantime, right?
Let's do that. You and then again you.
Hi, Shashwat. This is Rishi. Thanks for the brilliant talk. I just wanted to ask you or have your perspective on the rate of acceleration needed in power generation for India. It currently stands at about 5 terawatt, I guess. But in the age of AI and data center, what's the best strategy should be for India to go to, let's say, 2.5 or 3 terawatt? It's going to
Shall
be
we take
needed
the other
in a
questions?
decade.
We can take both. Oh, yeah, okay.
And how much time do we have? That's it then. This is the last, right?
Okay.
So apologies to others who put their hand up, but this is the other question.
Hi Shashwat. As a third gen entrepreneur myself, I was wondering like how do we pivot? Like we are already into petroleum business, so we have to pivot. So what's the possibilities? What's like top 5 according to the consumer consumption patterns have you seen? And what would be like top 5 industry that we could choose to divert into?
Sure. So I'll take the first question, which is, I think when you look at energy consumption, right, across the board it's going up. And as you said, demand is only going up. I think all the discussions and policies put in place till date, I don't think will capture all of that demand, right? We were still going to be short when you look at the next 10 years. And the reason I'm saying that is because at the speed at which technology is changing, now data centers, now AI is guzzling data, but then you have, things like DeepSeek, which actually give you the same kind of AI with much less energy consumption. So we have to really see how all of these energy guzzlers evolve over the next couple of years, and therefore what the energy demand is going to be. I think today the government is just trying to move, or India is trying to move, like the world, to energy which is more green, right? So I think that's the first step. And of course there are countries, and I was with the former Prime Minister of the UK a few days ago, and we were talking about energy, and he said for the UK going forward, nuclear is going to be something that will be very important to get clean energy from. So and the moment you go to nuclear, everything, the whole dynamics change. So I think it's a very fast evolving space, and we'll have to keep evolving our business models to kind of stay abreast with what changes are happening in the industry. And to your question, I mean, I don't think I have a magic wand to tell you which are the 5 industries, but I think it's important to reinvent it, and that's something I have seen over the generations in our group as well, is we've always been a group that has reinvented itself to stay relevant to the times that we are operating in. And I think that's been the reason why we've been able to last through 8 generations as well. We're not holding on to something just for old time's sake. The businesses are evolving. So physical retail evolving to quick commerce, consumption evolving more to D2C, energy evolving to green energy, venturing into newer sectors, talking about Gen Z, and we were talking about consumption via experience, hence the investment in sports for us as well. So it's just about trying to see what is relevant at that point in time and how can your business pivot to something like that without changing the very core of what the business is. That's what we do, at least.
Great. Apologies, I'll not be able to take in any questions, but I'm sure, Shashwat, you're around for a few more
Yes,
questions
absolutely.
after this session.
Sure.
I think all I want to say is thank you so much. And you've heard us skipping from sustainability to digital to, you can see how it's all linked, right? Traditional, legacy, it's all interconnected. But what I would like to end on is whatever we do, the demographic dividend that we have, youth, and I like to add children, because children are our future generations who are youth. How do we think about their entire life course? Because ultimately it's not just the skills and the education side of it, which we've heard a lot, but how do we ensure all of the spectrum to then arrive to the skills and the entrepreneurship, etc., that we're talking about. So my final comment is, hopefully we can all work together for a sustainable, inclusive and youth-led growth. Maybe that could be the definition and what that looks like.
Absolutely, and just to add, I think it's important that all segments and sectors work together, because I'm a fundamental believer that 1 + 1 is equal to 11, and that's the best way to kind of work. So
that's brilliant. So on that note, we'll finish, and thank you so much.
thank you.